Hi, everyone. Today I'm here with Jared Maxwell. Jared is a contributing author in the Mortgage Manager Mastery book, a sales leadership book for the mortgage and financial industry for new and experienced managers. Jared wrote a fabulous chapter on walking the talk, the true power of leading by example. Highly recommend reading it. Jared is a vice president at Embrace Mortgage. In his role, he's running a branch today, and prior to that was the head of Consumer Direct. Hi, Jared. Jared, thanks for joining us today. Loved your chapter and can't wait to talk to you about our questions today. And starting off with the number one question, what's the big idea that you want to share with our listeners regarding your chapter?
The one idea I would like to share is that leadership starts with you, or leadership starts with me, right? It's one thing to be in a management role and give instructions or tell people what to do. It's another thing to be living that by example. So that might be in your personal life, cultivating habits that require discipline and self growth.
Hmm.
But within the company, are you doing the same things that you're asking your people to do? Are you learning about new programs? Are you utilizing technology? Are you learning AI?
True. Yeah, you hit on a really important topic, and I can't agree with you more. You can't lead without setting an example for sure. And so it does start with the individual person. So talk about the action step. What would you recommend for a leader to, in essence, put in place to, in other words, become all of this that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think one element, Pat, is, this element of being a lifelong learner. I think that's
Mhm.
vital to, your growth and success. But I think another element is putting yourself in a position where you're comfortable being uncomfortable. And I know that sounds, super cliche, but we live in a culture, and I think, certainly in real estate, where we just want to present ourselves as sharing our successes. And we also want to be great advisors. We want to guide people responsibly. So, sometimes that means, learning a lot about a program, thinking ahead of the possible objections, and mastering something before you've even presented it. But there does come a time where, like, you might have to pivot to utilizing a loan program that you've never used. So, you might be, I guess, what's the quote, flying the plane while you're building it. I mean, you want to avoid that, but sometimes you might be in that situation. So it's just, becoming a master of things, but also, not being afraid to, be on the field.
I'd also say, and I think you're raising a great point, is that at some point you're going to need a coach, some point you're going to need a third party, some point in your management leadership roles, you're going to need to have the objective third party. And I think that usually separates those that are great leaders versus others. They're willing to go through sometimes a coaching process that can be not the easiest thing in the world when you have to hear it from them. So good point that you're making. So when you look at, especially all this change, you mentioned AI, if you had to look at the next few years, what are some of the opportunities that you see for managers?
Yes. I mean, I think that one of the elements of, what it means to be a mortgage advisor moving forward is this element of what it means to be human, right? And that means to empathize and connect and relate and to build trust with people. And then I think, another facet of that is authenticity. And so, you think back into even previous management models or leadership models
Mhm.
where, there was a strong authority at the top. I mean, I think that people are looking to be led for someone, but by someone, that they can relate to, that's consistent and that holds shared values. And then I think this element of just, becoming a learner. I was speaking with someone recently who was debating whether they should get out of the business, and
Mhm.
I was sharing with them, like, other opportunities that might be available to them. And they made a comment of, they probably aren't going to hire me for that. They're going to hire somebody who's in their 20s. And I don't want to, like, dismiss that, maybe that the fear of having to adapt at this stage in this person's life. But at the same time, when you think about what would be the reasons why somebody would want to hire someone like that, it might be that they're more adaptable, right? They're more willing to learn. They pick up new things. And so I think, we always have to be trying to sharpen our skills and honing our skills so that we can be that person.
Well, it's as you already mentioned, being a continuous learner is really the driver of all of that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So, any other takeaways that you want to share for our managers listening today?
Yes, I mean, I think people don't want a perfect leader. They want a consistent leader, right? And so I think that's important. And then I think, you don't grow by getting it right the first time. So, there are things that we do that are uncomfortable. We had talked about, the last time I was on this podcast, Pat, was back in 2021, and the topic of that podcast was what happens when refis drop by 62%. And in my case, it resulted in us closing our direct to consumer division, me having to pivot back into being a producing originator and, leading people going out into a local market who are experienced loan officers, but who haven't built a lead gen system that way. And so, that experience has certainly shaped me and built a lot of valuable qualities, as well as, allowed me to pick up on new skills. And, one of my colleagues actually said, I didn't foresee making as many new relationships and friendships in my 50s than I have over the last 24 months. So there are positives to these things as well.
Well, I agree with you for sure that success never lasts forever. Like refis don't last forever. And so the key to survival of that is moving forward with it and versus trying to fight it and reliving the past. So I'm with you on all that. Thanks so much, Jared, for sharing your thoughts today. And certainly for our listeners watching to check out more of and to do a deeper dive on Jared's thoughts by going to mortgagemanagermastery.com or Amazon to purchase the book. Thanks so much, Jared.
Thank you, Pat.